Morning, everybody. My question for you today is, are you a living sacrifice? Our verse is Romans 12:1. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Have you thought about your body as a living sacrifice? This is like saying we are his temple. We are both his dwelling place on earth and his instrument to be used for his purposes. After all, we were bought with a price. Letting God use us in this way is a high form of worship. Have you thought about that? It is how we honor him and give him glory. How would you want to treat your body if you were planning on giving it back to God? With the utmost care. After all, it's not your own, but only on loan. Think about this the next time you're eating or drinking, or the next time you're tempted to stay up too late. I will try to think about that too at times. Is this what God would want me to do? Now, our recipe for today is a tabbouleh, which traditionally, tabbouleh is made, I believe, with bulgur, which is a grain. And so since I don't eat grains, I'm not making it exactly that way. We're going to make it a little different. So I'm actually going to have my base be cauliflower rice. So you start out with probably about half a head of organic cauliflower and chop it up. Throw it in your food processor until it's, approximately rice size or quinoa sized, something like that. And I already did that, so you didn't have to listen to my food processor, but going for a while. So that's your base part of it. Now you're going to add, just one sec here. And this isn't a liquid measuring cup, but we'll make do. But you add approximately a quarter of a cup. I think I'll probably go a little bit less than that myself, because I find I have a limited threshold for the tart. But I'm spreading that out over. Effectively, what you're doing is pickling this. And I don't happen to have any. It's mostly olive oil. I mostly use to spray it on salad or something like that. I don't use it a lot in my cooking because I think it's better not heated up a lot. So I don't actually have a container. Laying a pretty good layer of olive oil in there. Obviously, we're going to need to mix this up a bit eventually. Okay, and then I also want to add in a little parsley here. So take off some of the extra stems. So I'm using Italian parsley, which for this purpose would work a little bit better than if you were using the curly leaf. But this is going to add a lot to the flavor. can, of course, cut back how much stems there are in there, but I chose just to cut off the big ends and not get real persnickety on everything. If you wanted this super fine, you could also put this in a food processor. That on top of the cauliflower rice here. Grab a spoon. So that's about, a couple tablespoons or so of fresh parsley. And I'm working that and the olive oil down in. And you can do that parsley up a little bit finer if that's your preference. But it's not the easiest stuff necessarily to cut up super fine. Getting the edges here, because edges are not as well mixed here. So pull them out. Basically going to use this as a side salad. Now another option you can do that's probably a little more traditional tabbouleh is to actually cut up some tomato and add that into it. I am choosing not to because I don't do a lot of tomato generally. I try to kind of minimize how much of that I'm having, and especially right at the moment. So I'm actually going to leave it out, but adding some fresh tomato, chopping it up into smaller pieces, could be added into there. You can also do it in a little bit bigger container, make it a little easier to mix up, especially if you're wanting to put the tomatoes in there. But this is in a container that I can then throw a lid on and stick in the fridge. And one more thing to add into here is actually I'm going to finish it off with a little bit sprinkle of Celtic salt. Put that down in. Okay, so there's our tabbouleh, and you're going to let this sit for probably 4 hours. Ideally stirring it occasionally, though I probably won't be doing that myself as far as actually stirring it up a bunch of times because I have other things to do and won't be right at my refrigerator to do that. So you just want to let that kind of marinate, get all the flavors mixed together first before you serve it. And it's actually good for several days. So uh, go ahead and try out that recipe. I will be back next week. I believe we're going to be doing a breakfast recipe instead of lunch, is my recollection. And of course, we'll be back actually with the next verse from Romans. So, continuing on, we've been a living sacrifice, and now we're going to get into the action of what does that mean? How do we act that out? What should that look like in our daily lives? That's next week. So come back to next week on Tuesday at 8 o'clock to watch this live. See you then.